official, it really is motorcycle. And the reason why it's motorcycle is because it was memorialized in song by, I believe it's Arlo Guthrie back in the 70s. And part of the lyric to the song was, I don't want a pickle, I just want to ride my motorcycle. So it has to be motorcycle, not motorcycle, for those of you who are confused about that issue. A special greeting to the Indonesian students who came today, looking all wonderful with sunglasses and stuff like that. Yeah, black eye, I get it. You got in a fight with your girl last night, she beat you up. We understand, that's okay, right? Okay, how many people had a good 4th of July this year? Okay, maybe a better question. How many people had a bad 4th of July this year? Just one? Okay. What'd you do? There's kind of an interactive section right here. What'd you do? How many people had some special food? How many people went to a special place? How many people did something special? How many people just had an ordinary day at work? Right? Wasn't quite an ordinary day, man. We gave you some good food. Went out and bought potato salad, a piece of macaroni salad. Everything you did on Wednesday, you did because you were free to do so. Why were you free to do so? This slide's a little early, but over 200 years ago, our country did something phenomenal and almost unheard of, is they declared they wanted to be free. Can you imagine what life would be like in our country if we weren't free, if nobody had ever written the Declaration of Independence? For example, what language would we be speaking right now? Who knows? Might be English, might be Spanish, might be French, could be Chinese. The Chinese don't know what everything is yet. It could be Native American Indian. Our life would be different. Our country, prior to this, if you look up at the screen, it says 13 states. How many do we have now? Almost 52. There's a couple of wannabe states we won't let us yet. Why? Oh, why? You know, have you ever been to England? We drove through one time. We were on our way for a cruise ship, and we just kind of got a quick taxi through from London to Southampton. And London seemed like a nice enough place. Anybody ever been to London or anywhere in England? Is England a nice place? Why would we want to separate from them? They're nice people. Don't they seem like nice people? How about the Spanish? Anybody ever been to Spain? Spanish people, nice people? How about France? Anybody ever been to France? Are the French people nice people? I know we've met some French people in Canada, and they seem pretty nice.
I married a French woman, and she's very nice.
Well, there you go. Why wouldn't we want to have these people ruling over us and giving us their support? I mean, after all, we were a fledgling country at this time. But you know, for 100 years before 1776, our country was starting to have problems with the people in England. And the king was doing things and saying things and enacting laws, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. I want to ask, how many people have ever read the Declaration of Independence? Really? I'm impressed. Usually, some people, I don't know, I might have read it in 5th grade or whatever. I read it this week, and I was so impressed. And so for those of you who haven't, I'm going to let you read it today. And like I say with all my sermons, what does this have to do with Christianity? You'll see. In Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another and assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinion of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to this separation. Kind of an old English way of saying things. I've been together with you for a long time, and now I'm tired of being with you, and I'm going to give you a reason why I'm not with you anymore. But it's interesting here that in the very Declaration of Independence there's reference to God, the God of nature. We hold these truths, this is the most famous part, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You have a right to that. But under that system that they were in, they didn't really have that kind of right. And if you want to know what makes this nation great, is this paragraph right here. This Declaration of Independence. We are the only country on the planet that gets our rights and our privileges from God. Everybody else gets them from the king or the pope or the dictator or whoever's in charge of their country, in some cases the military. And if you want to read along as I read these things aloud, you certainly can. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power and consent from the governed. That's us, the ones that are governing. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and their happiness. If you're living in a situation that you don't want to be in, you have the right, you have the duty, you have the responsibility to change things. My kids used to say to me, "Dad, I'm bored." And I would say to my kids, and they still repeat it back to me, boring things happen to boring people. Sad things happen to sad people. Unhappy things happen to unhappy people. If that's you, you have the right, you have the duty, you have the responsibility to reorganize your life, just like the people who wrote the Declaration. They were going to reorganize their life so that they could have safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light or transient causes. And accordingly, all experience has shown us that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. You know what that means? Women stay with men who beat them. People stay in bad jobs. We refuse to right ourselves. You know what that means? You know, when a ship's tipped over, you have to right the ship. You have to straighten out your course. You have to get on the right path. We refuse to do that because we're so happy with it's always been that way. I don't know how to live life any differently. Kind of a lifestyle. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evidence, a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. If your life's been miserable, you have the right, you have the duty, you have the responsibility to change that life. Now let me ask you, can you do that? Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity to which constrains them to alter their former system of government. When your life's going down the toilet, you need to reach up and grab for something. When your life isn't being what you thought it would be, how many people have ever said that? I don't think I'm where I should be right now. All of my classmates, all of my friends, all the people I grew up with, they have better lives than I have right now. Why is my life floundering? It's because we're clinging to former systems of government. You have to ask yourself, who is governing you? The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having a direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. To an open and honest person, you can tell them how you've been treated badly by your boss, and they're going to have a listening ear. To an open and honest person, you can tell them how badly your spouse is treating you, and they'll have a listening ear. These are the things that the King of Great Britain was doing. He has refused to assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his government to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation until his assent could be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend them. He won't give them any law. He didn't give them any laws to support them and to nurture them and to get them along. And if they try to pass their own laws, he said, wait, you can't pass any laws until I say it's okay. And then he just sort of throw it on the back shelf, and he wouldn't pay any attention to them. He has utterly refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants. Okay, I'll pass a law for you, but you have to bow to me. You have to allow me to make all your decisions for you. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and at a distance from the depository of their public record, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. Raise your hand when you figured out the corollary they were coming up with here. No hands yet. Okay. Have you ever been in a position where somebody just wears you out? Denise knows what this is like. Because when I want something, I'll just at her until finally she says, okay, fine, do it your way. You remember the story of Balaam and the talking donkey? Same scenario there. Balaam wanted to go and curse Israel, but he couldn't because God said you can't. So he kept pressing the issue. So finally God said, okay, fine, go ahead, but you're going to say what I tell you to say. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative power, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all dangers of invasion from without and convulsions from within. That's disobedience. People are attacking you and from outside and from within. He won't support you anyway. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states for the purpose of obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of land. In simple terms, we don't want any foreigners coming in here. We don't want to let you have any land. We don't want to open things up for you so that you can have a nice life here. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for the establishing of judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for their tenure of their offenses, for their offices, and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has rejected a multitude of he has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and to eat out their substance. Anybody know the corollary yet? You're still all in the dark? Oh my goodness. I'm going to have to do this twice if somebody doesn't get it. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil powers. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our own Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts as of pretended legislation. You know what that means? We're going to set up a town over here and we're going to let them grow and grow and grow. And pretty soon they're going to overtake you. And all the things that you grew up with, that's going to be in the past. Because I'm going to recognize these people and not you. For quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states. Do you imagine that? A politician is so corrupt that he can send out troops to kill you, and he just covers it up. But it's okay. Something like that happened during the persecution and Reformation time, right? People were given indulgences. People would go out and kill, rape, pillage, murder, whatever they wanted. And it's all okay because the church has sanctioned this. For cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us, in many cases, of the benefit of a trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government and enlarging its boundaries as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule in these colonies. Once again, sets up something over here to take over here. You know, things spread. Anybody figured it out yet?
The great controversy between Christ and
Give that lady a trophy. For taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the form of our governments. For suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate over us in all cases. He has abdicated government here by declaring us without his protection and waging war on us. He has plundered our seas and ravaged our coasts, burned our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He, at this time, is transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the work of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy. You know what perfidy is? Nobody knows. I didn't know either. I had to look that up. That's sort of like passive-aggressive behavior. It's like, I'm gonna say I'm gonna give you this, but I'm really not gonna give it. I'm gonna say this just to make you happy, but I'm gonna take it away. Scarcely paralleled by the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy of a head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive at high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, to fall themselves by their hands, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrection among us, and has endeavored to bring the inhabitants of our frontier, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all sexes and conditions. In every age of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble of terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may be defined as a tyrant is unfit to be a ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in our attentions of British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of the attempts by their legislature to extend unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity. And we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred and disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt connection, and correspondence. All that's saying is they're cutting us off from our family and friends back home. We know that you are kind and just people. Please help us out. Here's what they respond. They have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. That just means common family heritage. That's what that word means. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the restitute of our intentions, that just means right by the righteousness of our intentions, do in the name and the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of a right ought to be, free and independent states. That they are absolved from all allegiances to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as a free and independent states, they have the full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may have a right to do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance upon the protection of the divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Anybody treat you like that in life? Kick you when you're down? Tell that they're going to be nice to you and then they're not? You know, for a long time, I asked if anybody could figure out the corollary, and we've heard the great controversy. You can substitute the king of Tyre for the king of Great Britain. You can substitute the prince of darkness in there as well. For how many of us have allowed him to have control of our lives? How many of us have been uneasy? We've had jealousy. We've had fear. We've had persecutions. All at the hands of someone who would be king over us. If it were not for the fact that Jesus stepped in and changed our lives. In Congress, July 7th, 2012. I said if you didn't get it, we'd have to do it twice. So I simplified the English and changed a few words around so it would make sense. The unanimous declaration of the people of God. In the course of human events, it has become necessary for us to dissolve the bands which have connected us with the powers of the earth and separated us from the love and power of our God. Anybody here willing to declare that? Think about that. I'll ask again. We believe these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. God wants us to be the happiest people ever. He says, I've given you exceedingly abundantly above all that you can ever hope or dream of. Ellen White says we have nothing to fear for the future unless we forget how God has led us in the past. That to secure these rights, God instituted among men a Son, deriving his power from the consent of God. That whenever anything becomes destructive in our lives, it is our duty to forsake it and to reinstitute God's government, relying on its foundation, principles, its power, and love for our safety and our happiness. Prudence indeed will indicate that long-established ideas and habits cannot be changed in our own strength. For experience has shown that we are more inclined to suffer the old life of evils than to right ourselves by abolishing the behavior to which we have grown accustomed. Old habits die hard, right? But when we realize the long train of abuses and humiliations invariably repeat themselves, the evidence becomes clear that we have fallen under absolute despotism. Satan will take control of your life if you allow him to. If you leave the door open just a crack through old ideas, old habits, old behaviors, he will throw that door wide open and he will invade your life and control you with absolute despotism. It is our privilege and duty by the grace of God to throw off Satan's government and to accept new guardians for our future security. Who do you suppose those guardians would be? Guardian angels, people you know in church that are positive influence upon you. The history of the Prince of Darkness is a history of repeated injuries and usurpation. You know what a usurpation is? You have something, I'm taking it. You have a freedom, I'm taking it away from you. You have a dollar bill, I'm going to take it away from you. All having the direct object of the establishment of an absolute tyranny over mankind. He has refused to assent to God's law, the most wholesome and necessary for our good. He has forbidden anyone to help us. He compels us to harm our bodies and to keep us distant from the depository from God's love, for the sole purpose of fatiguing us into compliance with his measures. Have you ever been so tired from work that you don't want to come to church? You ever been so tired from school that you don't want to come to church? Ever been so tired of the politics at church that you don't want to come to church? He has disgraced the representatives of God repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasion on the lives of people, whereby exposing all to the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions from within. Throughout history, God has had spokespeople. And even today, you and I are God's spokespeople. But Satan is perpetually and repeatedly going around saying, oh, you can't listen to John. Look at what John used to be like. You can't listen to him. Making a mockery of our religion, saying that we're a cult. Right? There's all these things that are out there to constantly deny us any influence over our friends. He has obstructed the administration of the justice of God by rebelling against the laws established before time. He has made judges and rulers dependent on his will alone for their tenure in office and for the amount and payment of their salaries. You ever met a corrupt politician? Right? Do you think for 1 second that if Satan can control somebody that might have power over you, that he wouldn't do that? The person who's giving you a job, the person who's giving you a grade in school. He has erected a multitude of new offices, and hither sent swarms of officers to harass our people and to eat out their substance. He has kept among us standing armies without our consent. He is affected to render the military and earthly government independent and superior to the power of God. Have you seen that in the news at all? You can't have Bibles on military bases. You can't. I mean, they take down the 10 Commandments from public buildings. And you know what? The only thing I think, the only reason they leave the Declaration up there is the print is so tiny they can't see God's name there. To see the fact that our country was founded on a freedom based upon God's ideals and God's principles. And as far as these swarms of officers to harass his people, have you ever felt harassed being a Christian? Have you ever felt like the world is kind of against you? Have you ever looked at the back of your Sabbath school lesson and tried to mathematically figure out how many Adventists there are in a country? 1 in 1,000? 1 in 10,000? How many Adventist people are here in Goodland, Kansas compared to the population? In the town that you live in, how many Adventist people are there? Let's expand that just a little bit because we don't want to be narrow. Let's say, how many Christians are there in the world at large? We're outnumbered. For convincing them that they will have no punishment for any murders which they commit on the people of God. Have you heard about the death decree? Anybody heard that? The future death decree? Right? Anybody that doesn't have the mark on their forehead or their hand doesn't deserve to live? Right? He'll convince people they're doing the right thing, that they're doing God's work. For cutting off our witness to all parts of the world, for imposing burdens on us, for depriving us of a true picture of God. Ellen White said that millions of people have been driven from God by the picture of God presented from the pulpit. And if any of you remember that sermon that I did on the topic of hell, I actually read part of a sermon that someone gave 150 years ago. Scary stuff. And there's millions of people around, Ellen White said, have been made skeptics and infidels. Well, if that's the way God is, I really don't want anything to do with him. Because we've been misled. We don't have a true picture of God. For taking away our character, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the form of our worship. He has abdicated God's government here by declaring us as his prize and waging war against God. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete their work of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun. He has constrained our fellow citizens captive to bear arms against us, to become executioners of their friends and brethren, or fall themselves by his hand. Can you imagine the day when the government would ask you to turn in your friends or your relatives because of their political or religious views? Do you know our government is doing that today? It's even in the school system for little bitty kids that if your parents are doing this, you need to tell somebody in authority. It's slow, it's insidious, and it's taking over our country to the point that we're going to rat each other out, and someday, somebody that's your friend, your neighbor, your coworker, may say to the police, hey, you know what? I know this person who's a Seventh-day Adventist, and I think you need to check them. He has plundered our seas and ravaged our coasts and burned our towns and destroyed the lives of our people. He has excited domestic insurrection among us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of this frontier the fallen angels whose mission is warfare, is destruction of all ages, all sexes, and conditions. They don't care, as long as they can get somebody. You ever met somebody who works on commission? In the profession, we call it eat what you kill. So you don't get paid. Well, car salesman, perfect example, right? If they don't sell cars, they don't get paid. Doctors, if they don't work, they don't get paid. Lawyers, if they don't work, they don't get paid. It's funny how that doesn't work for everybody in life. There's a lot of people I've known that don't work and they still get paid. Nor have we forgotten our earthly brethren. We have warned them of attempts by Satan to extend this unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We've appealed to their native justice and mercy, and we have begged them to disavow these usurpations and join us. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and have common heritage. You ever try to tell somebody about Jesus and they just turn away? We therefore, the representatives of earth, in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the righteousness of thy name's sake, and by the authority of God solemnly publish and declare, that we, in the name of Christ, ought to be free and independent of Satan, that we are absolved of all allegiance to the prince of darkness, and that all connections between us is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that we are free and dependent child of God. We have the full grace of Christ over acts and things which have separated us from God. And for the support of this declaration, with firm reliance upon the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortune, and our sacred honor. Anybody here not see the correlation that I was trying to bring up? Satan is a despot, a tyrant, and he wants to control your life. He wants to control the lives of your children, your grandchildren, your neighbors, your friends, the people that you work with. And sadly, he's winning the war. Because there's not enough of us who are willing to put up this kind of a declaration and say out loud and say publicly, I am a Christian. I am proud to be a Christian. How many of us, when we're out in public, pretend to tie our shoe for a few seconds before we pray? Have you ever had the blessing of praying in public and having somebody come up to you and say, I appreciated the thought that you would do that? If you see somebody praying, you need to go up to that person and tell them that you appreciate them speaking out publicly for God. If we can't stand up for Him, why should He stand up for us? We have a tyrant that wants to take control of us, but we have a God who loves us and sent His Son into this world to change things for us, to give us a good picture of God, so that we can respond and that we can help other people to respond, that we can declare our dependence on God and our independence from Satan. Our closing hymn this morning is, in your bulletin, is 547. Oh, that's last week. No, this is 547. Oh, before we get to the hymn, go back to your scripture reading. John's version said it a little bit differently than mine. John 8:31. Jesus said to those who believed in Him, if you obey my teaching, you really are my disciple. Now go on to verse 32. If you know, who can finish it for me? The truth will... We've been lied to. We need the truth. What's our hymn? 547. Shall we stand together, please?
Yes. It's the part.
Good morning. How are you? This time she applied for character. But they also, she made a
Beaches right there, Cop. Hi, Cop. And there's Gerald's right there with the glasses on. What's up, man? Everybody's getting together here.
Oh, it's only one person. Is there only one real person on there?
one person that we know.
And Frank right there trying to. You're the man right there. He's the man right there.
What's up?
Well, I read that. It's just exactly.
But anyway,
I watched. I like that movie. That makes sense. See, that's the thing. You watch that stuff.